So Paul, give us a little background about where you are in life now. Meaning, like, what do you do?
Well, yesterday I just started a new job.
Before you start your new job, can you tell me what the job was just before that?
Well, I have rental offices here and that I manage, and also I am involved in the building of a continued care retirement community on the 50 acres of previously was the farm. And
Was the farm?
well, the acreage has been sold to Carroll Lutheran Village, and they are building a senior living retirement community on 50 acres that was part of the farm.
Okay, now you're gonna help me out with clarity here. The farm means,
Gray Rock Farm
and Gray Rock Farm
is
belongs to,
what's left of it is the Miller Land Company.
okay. So now you have a new job.
Well, it's not very important, but it is. A job's got to be done. My longtime part-time employee retired because of health reasons, and yesterday I was mowing the fields. So it was fun. I hadn't did that for a couple of years. And
So tell me about your family.
it's just my wife and I, and we live on the farm, which is now only 31 acres, and it's now a tree farm. And I started mowing between the trees back in 2004 when we planted 7,000 trees of all different Maryland trees, pine trees, a little bit of everything, and now they've grown up, and now we live in the woods.
Is it surrounding your house?
It's almost surrounding the house in the front towards the north.
Your current family, meaning your husband and wife, did you have children?
No children.
Okay.
Had a couple pets, but
Now?
we do a little traveling now, so it's a little hard to travel with a pet.
Where's the last great place you've been to, Paul?
Well, we only go to Florida now. We have a little house down near Naples in Fort Myers, and we go there during the winter months.
I know it well.
And we enjoy it. My wife, she would live down there the whole time, but I'm still got the Ellicott City responsibilities, and I just like the change of the seasons.
So you were growing up, and you were living on a farm growing up?
I moved with my parents on the farm when I was 3 years old from Ellicott City, and we moved into a house that was built in 1835, and it was very unique for me because I'd never seen a house that had 3 floors and we were living in, we had the rear entrance was the front entrance at one time, and so we have all these big trees around us. They're very historic, and I just enjoyed that immensely.
Where is that place?
That's on Gray Rock Farm, and that's on Frederick Road, 579 Frederick Road, Ellicott City, Maryland.
Just west of the library.
Oh, okay. The new library and the old
Yeah.
library. Okay, I've got a vague idea where that is. So how did that farm come into the family?
My father's best friend advised him to, in 1942, to buy this 435-acre farm. He said, one day it'll be worth a lot of money. And I think he paid something like $100,000 for it, and which was a lot of money in those days, and he was taking a big chance. And
What was his ambition
he was
for that?
he liked farming. He was living in Elk Ridge, grew up in Elk Ridge area on a farm, and they had like a vegetable farm. They grew vegetables, had churned milk into butter, and they went down to Baltimore and sold and he was just, his roots were a farmer, and he just wanted, and he went to Ellicott City because he got into the automobile business, but his farming was still there. He still liked the farm, and he liked to be out in the open spaces and with his flute, with his shirt tail flying. And so if he saw a worker with his shirt tail flying, he knew he was a good worker.
And now we're calling him your father's
Father, my father.
Your father, from your father's side.
Yeah, Charles E. Miller. He always went by, for some reason, Charles. He liked to say Charles E. Miller, but everybody called him Charlie.
E stood for?
Ernest.
Okay. So, where did Charles E. Miller have his farm experience?
It was down on Montgomery Road. It was called Miller's Corner. There was 2 or 3 Millers there, and he was
not related.
not related, but there was another Miller across the street, and so it was called. Now it's still got a sign up there that says Miller's Corner, and his farming was right there. He's where he learned from with his 6 other siblings. He had 2 sisters and 4 brothers, and they all worked hard on the farm. And my grandfather was born in 1850, and he was here for a while. My grandmother was 16 years younger than his, and she came over from Germany in the late 1800s, and they got married and had the 5 boys and 2 girls, and they worked on the farm and went to church there close by, and then he went to work for General Electric and worked there for 5 years, and General Electric decided to move to Philadelphia, and he said, I'm not going. So he saved his $5,000 and started the automobile business, and he lost it in the first 3 years, but he borrowed $5,000 from his father, and he started all over again. And of course, the dealership is history now. It's been there since 1928.
All right, so let's go back to the farming part. Grandfather, you knew your grandfather?
As a boy, he died in 1945. I just remember him as a young.
So you were like 3 or 4?
I was 4 years old. Yeah.
Okay, but you have some vague
Yeah,
image of your
yes.
grandfather.
He's I think he was in his declining years. All I can remember was him sitting on, every time we went to visit every Sunday afternoon, every Sunday evening after work on the farm, and we visited my grandmother, Oma, and she would fix her specialty, the home cooked bread, and he was just sitting there on a chair watching us as we walked by. And it was a lot of fun. We went there had kuchen, which was a good dessert to have, and she was a great cook, and we went there every Sunday afternoon.
Did you play and explore on that farm?
No, I don't remember anything
About that.
All I remember is a phone on the wall where you cranked it. That's all I remember. And it was a party line.
Did you get to play with that phone, or they wouldn't let you play?
They wouldn't let me play with it.
So
We played pitch. That was my grandmother's favorite game. Everybody had to play pitch when we went up there. Of course, I was a little bit too young then, but the whole family had to play pitch that Sunday afternoon for an hour at least.
you remember watching?
I remember watching, yes, that's right.
That's great. That is great. So that was your earliest experience around a farm for you.
Right.
And so then you had that exposure. What moves forward from that in terms of your farming experiences? Can you take me forward a little bit?
Well, it was really when we moved up on Gray Rock Farm, and when I was 3 years old, and I was a little kid, and we had work horses, and I would run down to when the blacksmith would come in every 2 weeks, and he would be shoeing these horses getting the horses the shoes real hot, and and I got in his way, and he said, "One day, I'm going to put this shoe on you." So I disappeared for the next year. I never came back to the horse while he was shoeing that horse.
So you started getting interested in farming then, or?
Yes, yeah.
Can you give me some of your earliest memories on, was it grabbing you? Was it a fun thing?
Yeah, I used to go down there, and one of my first jobs was to go down and get the eggs from underneath the chickens, and they would peck my hand, and I'd reach back, and then I would start again, and then where this chicken house was, this banty rooster would always chase me, but I got away from it all the time, and I go down and get those eggs every morning. So that was a lot of fun. That's one of my first experiences with.
And at that time, that was the vegetable farm?
It wasn't a vegetable farm, but there was a vegetable farm there when we came there, and it was a cannery, and they had all the pulleys and all the equipment to can vegetables there, and it had 100 employees canning these vegetables and setting up this, sealing the vegetables in the can after they canned it, did the thing to it, and for a side light, I'm a member of Rotary, and Paul Harris, the founder of Rotary there, worked for one day for $1 because he was traveling the world at that time, and so we have a street named after him in Gray Rock Farm. It's Paul Harris Court. So that was a great.
How old were you then?
I was only 3 years old. I'm just going back a little bit before
Yeah, no, that's fine.
time before that.
Do you remember the vegetables that were canned there?
Tomatoes, I know. Yeah, tomatoes. I wish I kept a seal that one of the
Sealing
little
jars, you mean?
jars, cans, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. They put. I think they just put the big cans together on there. But I saw the sealer what they had when I was a kid, and it showed where it just sealed the big can of vegetables on there.
So something inspired your father or grandfather to go into a different area?
Yes, yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, he liked to work on the farm, and that was his. I think his. Some people went on vacation. He liked to get on the farm, and that was his R&R. And he would, even on Sunday morning after church, he would go out. We had a cornfield, which is a picture. You see a cornfield out there, and he would plow with the horses. And he would work for a couple hours there, and the neighbor across the street would say to him, "Why don't you get a tractor?" And he says, "When the horses retire, I'll get the tractor." But he didn't believe in the modern equipment because he could turn around at the ends without plowing out the corn stalks with the horses. So you could do that, but with a tractor, you would clear out about 2 rows of corn. So he just in the turn. He was very efficient. He liked to have things done right. So that was one of the reasons to my brother, convinced him we need a tractor, and the rest of the farm
So
helps.
He finally saw some benefit to the tractor.
Right.
Was it because the horses were just too aged, or?
Yeah, the aging of the horses. That's right. I should have turned that thing off.
You're okay, it's far away. So, and we're talking about your dad now?
Yeah, my dad, yes.
So let's figure out the advantages of the tractor that he saw or that maybe you learned over time?
Well, the farm on Miller's Corner was probably 40 acres, 50 acres the most. This farm was 435 acres. So he saw the light. You can't do all this work with horses. You had to have a tractors, and you had to be able to.
Your dad's first name?
Charles.
Who was helping Charles?
He had a couple black families that worked there, and he had a couple one manager came from Virginia, and then in the summer months, the black family brought all their friends and things out from the city and helped with the harvesting. And
So,
and then we also brought over some families from he sponsored a lot of families from Europe, especially from Germany, and brought them over and got them going got them there for a while until they became citizens, and some of them stayed and they milked the cows. Every family brought over 4 or 5 families. They milked the cows. So that was, and they liked to get up early, so that was a perfect job for them.
so your dad's primary farming occupation was dairy cows?
Dairy cows, beef cows, and we had at one time 1,000 turkeys. And the story goes that he planted a field of tomatoes out there, and it had insects on these tomatoes, and he heard that the turkeys would kill these insects, eat these insects, so he got these 1,000 turkeys. And previously, one of the other families from history that lived there had turkeys too, so he thought he'd try turkeys. So it was a job. My mother and a couple of them went ahead and had to, at times was ripe, they had to go ahead and get these turkeys and dress them and put them out on the market.
Paul, do you remember the models of the tractors and what dealerships they came from?
I think it was Al's Chalmers was one of them, and it was Dorsey Owens, I think, had the Al's Chalmers, and it was one other, Billy Owens, yeah, Billy Owens.
William B. Owens.
Yeah, William B. Owens, yes.
International.
Right. International, right. Mm-hmm.
Became international?
Yeah, we had Farm All and International tractors.
And that dealership was where Walmart is today on Ridge Road in Ellicott City. Actually, it was exact spot where that
It was right.
Super Fresh was.
Yeah, Super Fresh, right.
It's now something else.
Right.
It
Mm-hmm.
was at that spot.
So let's talk about the cow steer population.
Pardon me, I didn't.
The cow steer population. Your dad, Charles, started out with a herd of, and over the years it grew to.
It grew to about 200 beef cows and 150 milk cows. And he did have at one time some hogs, but he got out of that real fast. It was too much work to butcher them, so he stayed with the cows. And of course, to run a farm, he didn't like to lose a lot of money. But he did make money, made some money one year, I think, but he had to work the farm to feed all these cows, so he raised the crops, corn and wheat, and which he took to the Donut Corporation, but the oats and things like that to feed these cows. So and hay, of course, he had and all these things was a lot of work, which he worked at the dealership. He started on the farm at 6 o'clock. He worked at the dealership for most of the day, but then in the summertime, he worked more on the farm than he did at the dealership, and to get the harvest in. But he had a lot of help, as I said, to get the job done. And then in the 1940s, which a lot of Harrod County farmers did, they had German war prisoners that came over, and we picked them up. And I always remember we got off we'd go down and pick them up at the freezer locker at that time, right at St. John's Lane, right a block from here. And the one prisoner brought the guard's rifle off the truck. He forgot off the bus. He forgot his rifle. The rifle wasn't loaded, but anyway, it was still a rifle, but he forgot his rifle. So these were all real nice. And my father spoke German, and he spoke to him, and he corresponded with him for years after that at Christmas. So it was great after they returned home, and they helped. Some of them were carpenters. Some of them, had good trades, and they built the milk barn that we had to build because it couldn't hold 150 cows in a little small building that we had there. And so they helped build the barn on there. So he knew how to get the best out of everybody.
And the milk machines grew from X milk machines, and what did it grow to?
Well, first we had the 10-gallon milk cans that we used to lug up to Pine Orchard, but then we got a little more modern, and we had a dairy where the milk was pumped right over into this freezer. And of course, one of the guys drank more of the milk than he should have, and so we had to put a locker on the milk. Olin Kettleman, he liked to drink the milk out of the freezer. He was a big, hefty guy, and he worked on the farm.
You were in school while this was going on?
Yeah, in school, yeah.
And did your dad ask you to help on the farm?
Oh yes, during the summer months.
Tell me what you did on the farm.
Well, I can remember when they used to. The first job I had was when they thrashed the wheat and barley. They had people that came by and they did it with a big thrash machine, and I would.
Who were these people?
It was O'Neill's. They went to every farm around this area, and then some, I think, John's father did a lot of that too. And
did he ever help you?
no, I don't think he came down and bought parts from us, but I don't think he.
Yeah, Mr. Stern nearby also had a thrashing machine.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then Ed Frank,
right.
of course, he did ours further
Right.
west of you.
Mm-hmm.
So there
Tom O'Neill.
farms couldn't support a thrashing operation, so some entrepreneur would assemble the whole train and come to your farm and kind of contract it. It was like a rental thing.
Right.
For the day.
Right, for the day, yeah, or for a couple of days or what have you. And I would bag the wheat because I would tie the strings, and then later on when it was a little hard to get this machine there on time, and Father liked to get the job done. He didn't want to wait, so he bought this combine in 1950s, and for $3,000. It was a new one. He was renting an older one, but he liked how it was done modernly, more modern work, not as many employees, because he couldn't get some of these youngsters come from Baltimore every year like they should on time. So we got this combine, and I still had my job as bagging the wheat. It was a hot job, and the dust was flying, but it was fun.
Did you take your wheat to the Donut Corporation in Ellicott City?
Yes, yeah. I remember hauling the bags down there. And
Give me a span of helping on that farm to helping on that farm. How far did you go?
Myself personally, I went to 1940s to the 1980s.
So you were growing up at the same time you were
Right.
working down.
Right, that's right.
So what was a typical, just remember one typical day on the farm for you. How did you juggle all the things that were going on and still be a good farm hand to your dad?
Well, my second job was to thin the corn. We had to pull out out of the hill, leave only 2 or 3 stalks of corn in the hill. If it was more than 3, and sometimes we only wanted 2, I would be going down these rows and pulling out the corn. That was my starting job. And then I one time they were getting in the hay, and they didn't have one to drive the truck. We had a hay elevator on the back of the truck, and didn't have one to drive the truck. So Father says, we're going to put you driving this truck. It has a throttle. All you got to do is look down the front of the grill, and he put me on a bale of hay or something. I don't know what he put me on, and so I could see over top, and I just guided the truck down the windrow of hay, and so it was great. I felt like I was on top of the world. So that was one of my second jobs.
Around what age were you?
I was 9 then.
Your feet could reach the pedals?
Didn't have to. We had a hand throttle, and he just pulled it out so far, and we just went down the road. Sometimes I pulled it out a little bit further out, and these guys start hollering on the back because I like to move a little faster. That was my devilment in me, I guess.
Stuck with the driving that for a while?
It was probably then I could reach it, and then I drove the truck on the tractor and pulled the wagon where we put these bales of hay up on top. That was our second. We got ourselves, instead of loose hay, we got bales, and some of these guys were so strong they could take a bale of hay with a pitchfork and put it up on the top. And this one fellow from Germany that we sponsored, he tried to do the same thing, and he broke the pitchfork. He couldn't get it up. He didn't know how to do it. You had to do it with it very easily to go up there. Some of his bales were alfalfa. They were heavy, and but we had to have the alfalfa for the milk cows, produce the right amount of milk. And so that was, and then we brought the hay into the elevators, and I would unload the hay on the elevator, off the elevator and they would go up to the barns, and we would store the hay there. Then one other job was when the silage was, we used to cut the corn by hand with a corn knife, and we have to lug it over to the shock, and we just put it there. And then I remember we were sitting there with a corn husker husking some corn. So we did a little bit of everything. Then we finally got a machine that cut the corn up into stalks, and or separated the stalks from the corn and put it up in the wagons. So it took us a while. We finally got everything going in the right direction. Could do it with less people, and it was fun. Remember all these things.
Yeah, I like that. So, you put in a long day, maybe?
I had trouble getting up in the morning, but anyway, my mother kept on me, and so I finally got up. But I worked longer hours. I stayed out there longer.
Would you work all the way to dark?
All the way to dark, yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And that went on how long for you?
It went up through the 50s, and then I did go to college then after the 60s and 58 after high school, and we kind of let the farm a little bit managed by other people, and we didn't work as much on the farm. But then when my father passed away, we still had I still had the responsibility then of making sure the guys did the job right, and so I was back on the farm again, watching what was going on.
So that meant you went away for college.
Yes.
You'd come home, and was college close?
It was Western Maryland College at that time, which is in Westminster.
Was it a commute or not? You went back
We
and
stayed
forth, or
there.
just
I
you
stayed.
Come home on weekends?
I came home on the weekends, right?
So you still got to be, in some way, experiencing what was still going on with the farm.
Right.
But so then after those 4 years went by, you decided to devote back to the farm again, but did you get a degree in agriculture, or did?
I kind of leaned towards the automobile business, to be honest with you. I liked the farming, but I guess I liked to ride too. And because
What years were they?
that was from 1961 on through 1987. I was in the automobile business.
Okay.
And,
So,
but then I kept my hands into the farming because we were, after Father passed away in '79, we only had 75 milk cows at the time, and it really wasn't conducive to have this 75 cows, so we decided to start closing down the farm, and Father had wanted to build a hospital here on the 50 acres that now is a retirement center, and he was going to make a gift of the farm in development of the farm as a gift towards this hospital, which never came to fruition. And years later, we finally got something there as part of the farm, 50 acres for this retirement center.
so let's go back to your finishing college, and the farm still existed in what kind of size capacity at that point?
It was still, at that time, it was still a working farm, 400 acres of farm. It was really 60 acres of woodland, and the rest was farming. And we had a good man there working with doing most of the work, and I helped on the weekends and sometimes at night. But basically, I started selling automobiles in late 1960s, middle of the 1960s, and then I went into the Army and was out for a few years, and then I came back, and the farm was still operating, but it started decline. Then the good manager left us in 1966, and he was really an idol to me because he could just work, and he knew all about it, the machinery, and he could fix anything. And when he left, the decline of the farm kind of started, and we then
Nobody wanted to find somebody equal to him?
couldn't find anybody equal to him. And
So it was tried, though.
it was tried, but we couldn't find someone. And when you're working different jobs that weren't related to the farm, unfortunately, you couldn't depend on some of the people that later on that just didn't do the job. And you came there and made sure that the cows. I remember I used to come back from in my lunch hour. I would go up to make sure the cows had water, and in the wintertime make sure that the ice was broken on the big bathtubs. We used to use big bathtubs, old-fashioned bathtubs, to water the cows and make sure the ice was broken. So we made sure that I kept my eye out that this was done, because my father would do it he would go home and go back on the farm and see what was going on. And
Good.
it was always involved, and he liked the farm. I liked it too, but I guess I didn't grow from day one. I didn't. My brother and I had some hard jobs that we didn't like. One of the hardest jobs was, and he did most of it, was to clean out the turkey houses, and that was a nasty job. And so it kind of made us a little bit. We just didn't like that job too much, but we did have a tractor, so that was good to pull the manure spreader out to the field. But
Who put more time into the farm, you or your brother?
I did. He got into the automobile business right away, and I stayed with the farming. But he liked the automobile business, and he liked more fun than I did. I was more of a serious type guy that was more like my father in one sense, that he was all business and I was more business-like. And sometimes I like my fun, but not quite as much as my brother. When we had the thrash machine and then later the combine, and how we got all that grain harvest and the hay brought in at the right time, cut at the right time, and it was just fascinating. We had a weather vane on top of one of the barns, and it's still there, and it's the horse barn where they kept the horses, and so that's good memories. And everybody would look at that weather vane and try to figure it out when the right time, we were going to have rain in the next couple of days, but it was that time when we got all the harvesting done and got the cows in from the winter for to feed them, even the Black Angus, which were stronger animals than the dairy cows, but we still got them in, and I'd get on one of the work horses and we'd go down in the meadow and drive them out of there, and that was, I felt like I was one of the Texas Rangers bring in the animals. So that was a peak time for me. I really enjoyed that.
How did your family treat the harvesting? Was it like, like many of the events that happen at the farm museum, they celebrate? Did you have some kind of a celebration that your family created together? Do you remember much of that?
I don't remember too much of that, but I remember my mother, and she had this black lady, Bessie, and she would help cook these from the garden. My father would bring in the garden, and they'd cook these home-cooked meals, and that was kind of our celebration. The workers and the German war prisoners, the sailors that are on that one picture there, they were here for 2 weeks off of the British sailors off the ship, and they need some R&R, and they came here and we fed them the home-cooked meals, and we had in the backyard and set up a big table, and that was kind of our celebration, I guess.
Did we talk directly about who the people were that were your mentors in farming?
Of course, my father was, and then the one manager, he was kind of he would help me with my 4-H steers. That was one of my greatest celebrations, when I had the steers and I showed them at the Harry County Fair. And one year I won the grand champion. So he helped me with the cattle and make sure that when they got sick, he would say, now they need some help. And so we'd call the Dr. Loper or Dr. Lewis, Fred Lewis, and they'd come out here and give them some medicine, and then we, some reason we didn't ourselves know how to do the medicine as well as the vets did, and some of the first cows, milk cows, when they had their first calf, they would develop milk fever, and this cow would have the calf would be running around, and the cow was on the ground paralyzed. And I remember one Sunday afternoon we couldn't find a vet, and we finally found Warren Myers' son. He came out and gave the cow a shot got this big needle out and put a shot in their vein and hit the cow on the backside, and the cow got up in 2 seconds, a couple minutes, I should say. So it was great to see this, when an animal that was in pain that could get up and go again. And that was exciting.
What did your mom contribute to the farm?
She worked hard. She had, when we had those turkeys, and we'd, which probably, when we had to go ahead and butcher, or whatever you want to do, cut their necks off, I guess, and she had to, her and Bessie, we took them up there, and she had to dress all these cows. And so that was, the horses, the turkeys, I should say. And that was a big job. And I remember one year was doing one of the Chevrolet dealers said that we didn't have any present to give to to their employees. So father said, we always give turkeys. So he said, well, can you give me some? So we had 30-pound turkeys, and we gave him all 30-pound turkeys that my mother had dressed with as long. And this guy said, this is the biggest damn turkey we ever saw. But they enjoyed it, so that was, and of course she fixed the meals for, and kept us going. When father came home, he had all these different jobs he was doing, and he didn't know, she didn't know what time he'd be coming home sometime, and she sometime be serving dinner at 6 o'clock, sometimes at 7 o'clock, so it was a job. She had to be ready to go at the minute notice to fix these meals, and then of course keep us boys straight. And so that was, sometimes she had more responsibility than anybody.
When you were working on the farm and your dad was running the farm and your mom was backing all of you up, did you find an opportunity to develop any hobbies?
No, I really didn't. I don't remember any hobbies.
How about,
We liked baseball, we played softball, and we had this one family, the manager that I was speaking of had 7 children too, so so we all got a softball together and had softball games at night, and so that was great. We had a couple of families that lived in their old farmhouse after we built a new house. My mother said she got tired of being cold. She was cold all the time, so we finally built a brick rancher in 1951, and this family moved in, and he was very knowledgeable in the agricultural field, and he even knew about getting rid of the fungus that was on our ponds. And so it was, I sleigh ride with his daughters, so that was fun too in the wintertime. So that was another fun job I had liked. And they had to skate. They knew how to skate very easily, and he taught me how to skate on the ponds. So that was good.
where did you go to school? Grade school?
It was Ellicott City Elementary School, and then Harrod High was the first senior high in Harrod County. Graduated from Harrod High.
So, you lost your dad, that must have been very rough.
Yeah, it was a lot of responsibility. And of course he liked to do most of it himself, so it was a hard job to pick up where he left over and where he left. So it was not an easy job, but fortunately I had a lot of good people around me, and so that helped a lot. And always
Gave
had
you support and
Yeah.
encouragement?
yes, right.
Who were some of those people?
Well, there was our pastors at church, and of course we had a attorney, Bob Weeder, advisor, and he kept me. He kind of, Father told him and said before he passed away, I want you to watch out and make sure that Paul and Don were doing the right thing, and then we had another farmer that who's still farming. His family's still farming, the Yeagers, and he was very helpful and tell me what to do with the properties. And he was the one that said, you can't keep the farm operating with only 75 milk cows. It didn't pay, and then we started to then sell some of the cattle off the farm, and we finally closed it up in 1983 then.
Did you have a sense of a farm community? I mean, can you describe that?
I guess Father always made sure that we went to the Farm Bureau banquets and participated with the other farmers, and then with the Harrod County Fair. This one farmer, the Clarks, he said, of course my father he was very frugal in one way. He would always give me a steer off the farm, and this one guy said, Charlie, why don't you get this boy a good steer? And that was the time that I won. He went and purchased it and that was the time I won the grand championship. So we always had that respect. Everybody respected each other and tried to help each other, and so it was always competition. One farmer liked the Black Angus and one liked the Herefords, and so we had both. So we kept everybody. we were, father liked politics, so I guess he kept everybody happy by having both.
That's great. What, just out of curiosity, what was that winning steer's name?
Herman.
Very good for Herman then.
Yeah, my wife always said, "Now, how could you take Herman to the when it was time you had to take him to them, have him sold, and then of course the money that you got from that steer, you start your next project with the next year." And of course my wife, she was an animal lover. She said, "How could you let Herman go to the market?" But my brother used to cry when his steers went. But I was a little bit more businesslike. I had to do it, so I kept on going. I think that's one of the reasons my brother didn't like the farming as much, because he was so sentimental with animals. He just liked the animals so much, and he saw them when you had to butcher them and stuff like that. It wasn't his thing.
Did you ever butcher an animal yourself?
I think I slit a couple of turkeys' necks. I didn't like that, but I had to do it, so we just went ahead and kept on going.
So can you describe to me the different equipment that you learned to operate over the years?
We had the hay rake, and first we had to go out there and cut the hay with the knife, the old long sickle bar, and we used to cut the hay, and then we had to let it dry out, and then our next job was to rake the hay in the windrows and make sure that it was ready to dry it out enough. Sometimes it rained and we had to turn it over again, and so that was I like that, riding that tractor. I always liked to ride, as you can see. And Father kind of gave me those jobs that kept me happy on the farm, so we kind of respected each other for that, so I enjoyed it. And then I never got to do the driving a combine, because it would break down a lot, and so he didn't want me to be working underneath those big machines, and so I just stayed on the upper part of it. So it was great, and my mother was probably the enforcer on that. She said, "Now don't let that boy get hurt." So I can always remember the time that Father came in and says, "My dinner ready?" And Mother says, "You may be the boss outside, but I'm the boss here." So she once in a while she had to tell him off. So it was fun to hear these things. And one time that we got this cake that one of the German families brought over, and it looked so delicious. My brother took the biggest piece, and it was lard cake. He said, "I wish I hadn't taken the biggest piece." It was good though. But that was the way it was fun to hear all these stories.
Other equipment?
I guess the only equipment I can think about is I still got a picture of an old bulldozer, and we never had any equipment, but one of the farmers that was there before had this little bulldozer, and you could see him pulling hay with that, and I guess it was I forget what it was called, the name of it, but I just liked that, and I guess that's one of the reasons that my brother and I convinced my father to get tractors, because they said the farmers back in the 1930s had equipment, and we didn't have any equipment till 1950. So that was a little we felt like we were a little bit behind the times, so we finally got on the right path. But I can't remember too many other of the tractors. I remember the 2 tractors and then the hammer mill that we used to grind the corn up, and then we'd have the wheat up in the barley up in the upper loft, and we used to shovel the barley on the wheelbarrow and roll it down on top of these boards and dump it into the hopper, and then someone else would be throwing the corn in the bottom, so we had the corn and the barley mixed together, and the tractor hooked up to the hammer mill, and we ground the corn up, and then we put it in the bags and put it up on a pickup truck and took it over to the barn for the milk cows or the beef cattle in the winter. And then I remember that was a fun job too, was the silos, filling the silos with the corn. We get first we would put the stalks in there. That was the first job, and that was before we had we ground the corn up off the ears, and then we haul it in, but mostly I like the stalks. We pull the stalks off the barns and put them into the and grind the stalks up into the silage and pump it up into the silo. That was Olin Kettleman, who was another youngster that I grew up with on the farm. We'd always compete who got the load off the field faster. So we were always battling each other who got there first. So it was fun.
If you had a child, how would you get him interested in farming? What would you talk to? This is your chance. You're the salesman.
The salesman. I guess you'd have to really just take him out on the farm and show him how the farmers did it, and that's one good thing about the Antique Farm Equipment or Antique Farm Machinery Club. They showed how the farming was done in the older days, and had all these youngsters up there and show them how they did all their farming. And I guess that was the only way I could show someone how to do it, was show him exactly how he. And of course, I didn't get married till I was 64, I guess, and the farming was starting to go downhill, so it'd been hard for me to show a youngster how to do it. But I guess if I had a child, that would be the only way I could do it, is take him out of there and put him on the seat like I was put on that truck seat, and drive that truck down the windrow till we got the hay in. Just sit you up there when you were 9 years old and put you up there. You couldn't see out the cab, but he said, "We'll just sit you up on this bale of hay and you can go down there."
How did you understand or get to learn about the community around you? Like your dad would need to sense other farmers and other timing things. Did you get any perception of how that was working?
I guess the only way we did that was with the Howard County Fairs. When I would go up there and or the state fair, we'd stay overnight, and we talked to some of the youngsters, the Bandles, who are now in the Farm Machinery Club. But we stayed and talked with them, and they would tell us how they did it, and they were a little more up to date. They told us about the trench silo, because when these silos we put up off the ground, the wind seemed to, when you had a storm, they would take them down, and this Mr. Bandel said, "Why don't you put a trench silo," which is underground almost. And so we started learning some things from them, and so that was the next thing we did, was put a trench silo instead of having the big silo above ground, which was sometimes a big problem when the windstorms came in, and they had the weight of that silage on there. It would split the sides of the boards.
Okay, so how did you and Art's paths cross? Let's talk about that.
I guess it's mainly through school. I was with his brother, who which unfortunately passed away. He was in the same grade with me, and Harold Boone, and we kind of went out together. And I can always remember he and of course Art were like the parachute out of the sky, and I'd see them. We'd go to functions, and they would come down, land in the field, and it was fun. And it was fun to see them come out. They were so adventurous. I don't think I'd ever do that, but I guess what you get used to is you can do it. And then of course, one time we had they always had this St. Paul's picnic, which was a fundraiser for the Catholic Church. And of course, we got along with everybody. We were Lutherans, but we got along with everybody. And they came to my father and said, "We don't have any place to have this picnic this year." So we had the picnic on the farm. We had live wrestling and some good singers there, and Art was there, and I was there. And the next day we had to clean up and found all these coins on the ground that they lost.
My brother and I jumped the Howard County Fair, parachuted in 1966, 1967, and 68.
Right. Yeah, I got a picture of that.
And
Yeah.
then for several years after that, the Maryland, the Special Forces group up in Towson parachuted in from a helicopter. But yeah, thank you for remembering that.
Yeah, that was, and we had, of course, my father was a staunch Republican, and we had these Republican fundraisers, and I can remember one year that up at one of the farms, you guys parachuted right there, or maybe it was the Harrod High Harrod High reunion, maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
It was a fall
Yeah.
football
Yeah, right.
gathering of classes, whatever
Right.
it's called.
That's right. Yeah.
Reunion?
No, it was a gathering of classes.
Multiple years?
Yeah, whatever that was called. We parachuted in there with smoke. My brother, we both had smoke bombs on our feet, and they were hot and they were burning. I mean, they made a really nice smoke. And my brother lost his when his parachute opened across the road on a farm from Howard High, but it never started a fire. Of course, we never found it either. But we would have if it would have caught fire across the road here.
So you admired that about Art, his ability to do that?
Yeah, I sure did.
I remember the St. Paul's picnic, as he was mentioning. They had, if you remember, Grandpa Jones and Ramona on Hee Haw. They were, of course, they were also at Brendel's Manor Park.
Oh.
And but they were there in the wrestling ring. And I know one of the wrestlers' name was Brown, his last name, but that's all I remember.
Yeah.
But one night they had the wrestling event, throwing each other around and slamming down on the thing. And the next night they had Grandpa Jones and his wife doing their musical inside that same wrestling ring.
That's
It
interesting.
was right on Paul's farm.
Yeah, that's where I built a house there, right on the farm there. Later on, when we first got married.
Now I believe that your entrance to your property, Gray Rock Farm, isn't Gray still on one pillar
Yeah,
and
right.
Rock on the other?
Right.
So
Mhm.
it's still there.
But originally, it was the farm spelling was Grey, and when one of the owners sent to want to get the spelling, want to get these pillars put out there, he didn't ask how it was spelled, and he put Gray, so then it's changed to Gray. He never asked that. It was Gray, but he didn't know that the spelling was he thought it was Gray, and he just went ahead and the pillars were changed to Gray.
And it was mentioned about being west of the libraries, but where the libraries and the senior center are located was also Miller property.
Oh,
All the way down to the river, the stream, or the
Yeah.
woods before you go up the hill.
Oh, it was up past the stream because the First Lutheran Church was donated.
Oh, way up there.
Yeah. Mhm.
Any other thoughts, guys? Because we covered a lot.
I hope I did something right. I did.
At
Very
least
good.
3 things, Paul.
I like this picture. If you could put that in, I don't know if you could put that in there or not.
We'll take it, I'm gonna stop the camera, we'll set it up to take it.
Yeah.
Because you're having audio on, tell me what the picture's about for you.
Well, when we
You need to see it?
when we go to family reunions, and or we get some people come up and said, "What did you do on the farm?" And I'd show them these sailors that were they came off the ship that were for R&R, and I show them this little boy with his coveralls on, his overalls on, and say, I was working when I was 3 years old.
Oh, that's you down there. Point to it.
And my brother's in the background.
Oh, thank you.
And my father always wore a white shirt, no matter what.
Your dad shaking hands?
Yeah, and he just liked to. He'd come home sometime and mow the grass in the yard with his white shirt on, his tie on. And then one time he came over. Valerie introduced me to Krabs because she was from Baltimore, my wife, and he came over to eat crabs with a shirt and tie on. So he said,
That could be pretty messy.
"Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, eating crabs is always a formal event, right?
Yeah, that's right."
All right, well, thanks, guys.
Well, thank you.